He leaned over the conference table and snarled, "Give me your password. Now." I did not argue or lecture. I simply opened my laptop to the one thing he hated most, which was security policy. One click, one confirmation, a system notification popped up stating all sessions revoked. The vice president glared at me until he tried to log back in and saw access denied. By 5 o'clock that evening, the only person reset from the company was him. My name is Piper Foster. I was 32 years old, sitting in the coldest room in the building, watching a man with a 7-figure salary lose his composure over a login screen. We were in Conference Room B, on the 14th floor of the Ridgeway Meridian Solutions headquarters. The room was encased in floor-to-ceiling glass, designed by expensive architects to symbolize corporate transparency. But today it just felt like a cage match where the spectators outside could watch the carnage without hearing the screams. The fiscal quarter was ending in 48 hours. The pressure in the air was thick enough to taste, metallic and bitter like old adrenaline mixed with stale office coffee. Brent Kavanaugh stood at the head of the conference table. As the vice president of operations, Brent usually carried himself with a practiced, slick charm, the kind that worked well on golf courses and client dinners. But today, the charm was gone. He was red-faced, sweating through his starch-stiffened collar, and looking at me like I was the only thing standing between him and his bonus check. He slammed his open palm onto the mahogany table. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot, causing the water in the pitcher to tremble. "I need into the vendor portal," he shouted, his voice echoing off the hard surfaces. "You are the one holding the keys. Give me your password." I did not flinch. I had spent 8 years at this company training myself not to flinch. I sat with my back straight against the ergonomic mesh of my chair, my hands resting lightly on the edge of my laptop. I looked him dead in the eye. "I cannot share my password." "Brent," I said, my voice was level, devoid of the panic he wanted to see. "You know the policy. Credential sharing is a terminable offense. It violates our compliance standards." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. He walked around the edge of the table, closing the distance between us until he was looming over my chair. He smelled of expensive cologne and nervous sweat. "Policy," he sneered, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. "Policy is written by people like me to keep people like you in line. I decide what the rules are in this division. Now, stop playing games and give me the access." He thought this was a power play. He thought he could bully me into submission because he was a vice president and I was just a senior ops systems specialist. He thought that because he had signed my performance reviews for the last few years, he owned my integrity. He assumed I was the same quiet, accommodating woman who had fixed his printer jams and recovered his lost files for nearly a decade. He was wrong. I turned my gaze from him to my laptop screen. The cursor blinked steadily against the white background of the internal dashboard. I was not angry. Anger makes you sloppy. I was precise. In my mind, I was already navigating the flowchart of the company security handbook. I knew the text by heart. Section 4, Paragraph 3 regarding compromised credentials. When a user is coerced, threatened, or forced to reveal their authentication details, the account is no longer secure. The integrity of the session is void. The immediate response is not to argue, but to contain. I typed in the shortcut for the incident response console. The screen shifted to a dark gray interface. This was the back end, the plumbing of the corporation that men like Brent never bothered to understand. I selected the option for credential exposure. The interface was not designed for user experience. It was designed for speed and finality. It was a stark, utilitarian gray with red accents. My fingers hovered over the keys. I could feel the heat radiating from Brent. He was so close I could hear the shallow intake of his breath. He was used to people folding. He was used to the terrifying weight of his title crushing the resistance out of subordinates. He expected me to crumble, to type in the 8 characters that would give him the keys to the kingdom, and then apologize for the delay. But he had forgotten who built the kingdom. I knew every digital brick in this wall. I knew where the mortar was weak, and I knew exactly which stone to pull to bring the whole thing down on top of him. I selected the severity level, critical. I selected the scope, user and device. The system asked for a justification. I did not abbreviate. I typed every word with deliberate care. Executive attempted to bypass established authentication protocols via direct intimidation. Risk of unauthorized data exfiltration is imminent. A warning box appeared. It asked for confirmation. It stated that proceeding would trigger an immediate revocation of all active sessions for the user and any associated administrative accounts. It warned that this action would automatically generate a high-priority ticket to the Information Security Team and the Internal Audit Department. I looked up at Brent one last time. He was tapping his foot impatiently, checking his watch. He had no idea that he had just handed me the weapon I needed. He was not asking for a favor. He was creating a documented security incident. I am waiting. Piper, he snarled. I am just logging it now. I said softly. I hit the execute button. It was a single click, but it felt heavy, like pulling a lever on a trap door. On the projector screen behind me, where Brent had his laptop connected, the image flickered. He had been trying to force a refresh on the browser, hoping the portal would magically open. Instead, the browser window went white. Then, a stark red banner appeared across the top. System lockout. All sessions revoked. Brent froze. He tapped his keyboard. Nothing happened. He swiped his mouse furiously. The cursor did not move. What did you do? He asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash, before the pain sets in. The projector hummed. The air conditioner rattled. Outside the glass walls, the office continued its chaotic dance. People were rushing to meetings, carrying coffees, laughing at jokes. They had no idea that inside this fishbowl, the hierarchy had just been inverted. Brent stared at the screen. The red banner was pulsing now, a visual heartbeat of the lockdown. He typed his password again. I could hear the keys clack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, enter, access denied. He tried again, harder this time. Access denied. He slammed the laptop shut. The sound was like a gavel striking a sounding block. He turned to me, his face a mask of disbelief that was slowly cracking into pure, unadulterated rage. I am going to fire you, he said. The words were low, vibrating with malice. I am going to have security drag you out of this building, and I am going to make sure you never work in this industry again. I stood up and smoothed down my skirt. I picked up my laptop and tucked it under my arm. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was done. The machine was in motion. You demanded my password, I said, my voice projecting clearly in the quiet room. Under the acceptable use policy, that demand constitutes a security breach. I did not lock you out, Brent. The system did. I just reported the threat. His eyes widened. He looked at his laptop, then back at me. The realization was starting to dawn on him. He was not just unable to log into the vendor portal. He was locked out of his email. He was locked out of the financial drives. He was locked out of the building access system. You fix this right now, he hissed, pointing a finger at my chest. You undo whatever you just did. I shook my head. I cannot. I said, it is out of my hands. Once the credential exposure protocol is triggered, only the Chief Information Security Officer can reinstate access, and he will only do that after a formal audit of the incident. Brent looked like he had been struck. He opened his mouth to scream, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. He knew what an audit meant. He knew what eyes would be looking at his logs now. You wanted the password, I said, walking toward the glass door. But what you are going to get is an investigation. I walked out of the conference room and did not look back. I could feel his eyes burning a hole in my back. But it did not matter. The first domino had fallen. The automated tickets were already landing in the inboxes of the Chief Information Security Officer and the Head of Internal Audit. There was no stopping it now. To understand why Brent Kavanaugh felt comfortable screaming at me in a glass room, and why I felt absolutely no remorse about ending his career with a single click, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back 8 years to when I was just a 24-year-old kid in Columbus, Ohio. who thought hard work was the only thing that mattered. 8 years ago, Ridgeway Meridian Solutions was not the sleek, glass-walled fortress it is today. Back then, it was located in a converted brick warehouse in the chaotic heart of Columbus, Ohio. The floors creaked under the weight of server racks. The air conditioning system rattled like a dying engine, and the break room always smelled faintly of burnt popcorn and ambition. I was 24 years old. I had fresh bangs, a degree that I was still paying off, and a blazer that I had bought at a discount store because I thought it made me look like a serious professional. I was hired into the operations team, a small, scrappy unit where job titles were merely suggestions. Everyone did everything. If the network went down at 3 in the morning, you fixed it. If a client needed a custom report by dawn, you wrote the script. We called it being versatile. In hindsight, it was just exploitation with a better name. My guide through this chaos was Tracy Hall. Tracy was the team lead, a woman who wore practical shoes and had a gaze that could peel the paint off a wall. She did not believe in luck. She believed in logs. She was the one who taught me that technology was not about magic, but about accountability. "Piper," she told me during my first week, pointing a pen at my notebook. "In this industry, if you do not write it down, it did not happen. And if it did not happen, but something breaks, you are the one they will blame." I took that advice to heart. I became obsessed with the anatomy of a request. I did not just solve problems. I autopsied them. Every ticket I closed had 4 distinct pillars of information recorded in the private notes section: who requested it, when they asked, why it was necessary, and most importantly, what was the risk involved. It became a reflex, like checking for my keys before I left the apartment. I was building a library of cause and effect, unaware that I was actually stockpiling ammunition for a war that was years away. Brent Kavanaugh was there, too, but back then, he was not the vice president of operations. He was just an operations manager, a title that sat awkwardly on him like an ill-fitting suit. Brent was the kind of man who was handsome in a generic, catalog model sort of way. He had a firm handshake and a laugh that was just a little too loud, designed to fill the silence where his competence should have been. He was a talker, not a doer. While Tracy and I were deep in the command line interface, troubleshooting database latency, or patching security vulnerabilities, Brent was hovering. He would lean against our cubicle walls, holding a coffee mug he never seemed to drink from, asking questions that revealed how little he understood about the infrastructure he was supposed to be managing. "So," he would say, flashing a nervous smile, "if the main server goes down, the backup just kicks in instantly, right? Like a generator." I would look up from my screens, my eyes burning from the blue light. "Not exactly, Brent. We have to initiate the failover sequence manually to prevent data corruption. It takes about 10 minutes. He would nod, his eyes glazing over as he processed words like failover and corruption. "Right, of course. Just keeping you on your toes." There were times when the systems truly failed. In those moments of crisis, the veneer of his confidence would crack. I remember a humid Tuesday in July when the primary payment gateway crashed. Customers were calling in. The support lines were lighting up like a Christmas tree, and Tracy was out sick. Brent stood behind my chair, his hands gripping the backrest so hard his knuckles turned white. "Fix it, Piper," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please, the director is going to have my head. Just tell me what to do." I felt a surge of pity for him. He looked like a child lost in a department store. I did not see him as a threat then. I saw him as a teammate who was drowning. So, I helped him. I walked him through the incident report so he could sound smart on the conference call with the executives. I wrote the email updates for him to send to the client list. I stayed until 9 at night to rebuild the transaction logs. When the dust settled, he slumped into the chair next to mine, loosening his tie. "You are a lifesaver, Piper," he said, exhaling a long breath. "Seriously, we make a good team. I handle the people. You handle the machines." I smiled, believing him. I thought that was how it worked. I thought my technical skill and his political maneuvering were two halves of a whole. I was naive enough to think that loyalty was a currency that gained interest over time. Then came the shift. 3 years into my tenure, Tracy Hall quit. She did not make a scene. She simply packed her personal items into a cardboard box, deleted her browser history, and walked out the door. She told me she was tired of fighting for budget that never came. "Be careful. Piper," she said to me in the parking lot on her last day. "The buffer is gone now." I did not understand what she meant until the following month. With Tracy gone, the department needed a new head. By all metrics of skill and experience, they should have hired an external candidate or promoted the most senior engineer. Instead, they promoted Brent. He had spent years polishing his image in cross-departmental meetings. He knew which jokes the vice president of sales liked. He knew the golf handicap of the chief financial officer. He had taken the work I did, the stability Tracy had built, and packaged it as his own management success story. He sold himself as the steady hand at the wheel, conveniently omitting the fact that I was the engine. The change in our dynamic was not immediate. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone. The nervous questions stopped. The requests for help vanished. In their place came directives. The "Hey Piper, do you have a second to look at this?" turned into "I need this report on my desk by noon." The "Thank you for staying late" became "This is part of the job description." He began to view my adherence to process not as a safety net, but as a bottleneck. Brent was a man who loved the concept of agility, by which he meant doing things fast and worrying about the consequences later. He wanted permissions granted instantly. He wanted vendors onboarded without the 3-day security vetting. He wanted results that looked good on a dashboard, regardless of the structural integrity underneath. I remember the first time we truly clashed. It was over a software patch for the inventory system. The vendor had released a hotfix, and Brent wanted it deployed immediately because it promised a slight speed increase that he could brag about in the quarterly review. "We cannot deploy it yet," I told him, standing in his newly renovated office. "We have to test it in the sandbox environment for 48 hours. That is the policy." Brent looked up from his phone, annoyed. "The policy is slowing us down. Other companies are moving faster than us. Just push the button. Piper." "If I push the button and it conflicts with the legacy database, we lose a day of orders," I countered. "The risk assessment is high." He stood up, walking around his desk. He was not the sweating, nervous manager anymore. He was the director, and he wore the authority like a weapon. "You focus too much on what could go wrong," he said, his voice cold. "I need people who focus on how to make things go right. You are too rigid. You need to learn to be flexible if you want to survive in this new structure." I held my ground that day. We tested the patch. It failed in the sandbox, just as I predicted. If we had deployed it live, it would have been a disaster. I thought he would thank me. I thought he would see that my caution had saved him from embarrassment. Instead, he never mentioned it. He simply stopped inviting me to the strategy meetings. He stopped asking for my input on long-term planning. I was slowly being compartmentalized, pushed into the corner where the technical mechanics lived, far away from the decisions. That was the seed of the conflict. He wanted a world where his authority could override reality. I lived in a world where a missing semicolon could crash a system. No matter how important the person who typed it was, he believed he was above the rules because he had a title. I believed the rules were the only thing keeping the roof from collapsing on our heads. We were on a collision course. I stayed because I loved the work, because I was good at it, and because I foolishly thought that if I just documented enough, if I just proved my value enough, the truth would eventually win out. I did not realize then that in the corporate world, truth is often just the first casualty of a well-formatted PowerPoint presentation. But I kept my notebooks. I kept my logs. I noted every time he asked me to skip a step, every time he ignored a warning, every time he chose speed over security. I was building a wall of evidence, brick by brick, waiting for the day he would try to run straight through it. I just never expected that 8 years later. In a glass room on the 14th floor, he would hand me the sledgehammer himself. It started with a paper jam on the communal multifunction printer in the hallway. It was a mundane, irritating Tuesday morning, the kind where the fluorescent lights seemed to hum a little louder than usual. I had walked over to retrieve a stack of system utilization reports I needed for a meeting, but the machine was flashing a red error light. Someone had sent a print job to the wrong tray, and it had caused a jam. Being the person everyone relied on to fix anything with a circuit board, I did not call IT support. I simply opened the side panel, carefully pulled out the crumpled sheets, and reset the feeder. As the machine whirred back to life, it spit out the remaining pages of the queue that had been stuck in the memory buffer. I reached out to grab my reports, but my hand stopped. The document sitting on top of the fresh pile was not a system log. It was an offer letter. It was printed on the heavy, cream-colored stationery that HR reserved for external hires. At the top, in bold, cheerful letters, was the name Harper Sloan. I knew the name. Harper was a fresh graduate we had just interviewed the week before. She was 22 years old, bright, eager, and had a resume that consisted mostly of college internships and a capstone project that I could have completed in an afternoon. She was being hired as a systems analyst, the most junior role on the team. My eyes drifted down to the compensation section. The number was printed in crisp, black ink, $96,500. I stared at the number. I blinked, thinking perhaps the toner had smeared or my eyes were playing tricks on me due to the lack of coffee. But the number remained unchanged, $96,500 per year, plus a $5,000 signing bonus. I felt a cold sensation wash over me, starting at the base of my neck and spreading down to my fingertips. It was not anger at first. It was a physical shock, like stepping off a curb that you did not know was there. I made $69,000 a year. I had been at Ridgeway Meridian Solutions for 8 years. I was a senior operations systems specialist. I managed the entire back-end infrastructure. I held the keys to the vendor portals. I trained the new hires. I fixed the disasters. And I was making $69,000. I did the math in my head instantly. The difference was $27,500. This 22-year-old girl, who did not know how to reset a server or navigate our legacy database, was walking in the door making nearly 40% more than me. I looked at the date on the letter. It had been generated yesterday. I picked up the page. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden, violent clarity. I had spent years being grateful for my 2% and 3% annual raises. I had accepted the narrative that the budget was tight, that the company was going through a lean period, that I was lucky to have a job in this economy. I had nodded politely when Brent told me that my 3% raise was the highest he could fight for. I took the letter and walked straight to Brent's office. I did not knock. Brent was sitting behind his desk, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up, annoyed at the intrusion, but his expression softened into a patronizing smile when he saw it was me. "Piper," he said, putting the phone down. "I am busy. Is the server on fire?" I placed the offer letter on his desk. I did not slam it. I placed it gently, facing him, smoothing out the corner where the printer rollers had bent the paper. "I found this on the printer," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Harper Sloan, entry level, $96,500. Brent glanced at the paper, then up at me. He did not look embarrassed. He did not look guilty. He looked irritated that he had been caught, but only slightly. He reached out and flipped the paper over. "You should not be reading confidential HR documents. Piper," he said coolly, "I make $69,000. Brent," I said, "I have been here 8 years. I built the system she is going to learn on. Why is a fresh graduate starting at a salary that is $27,000 higher than mine?" Brent sighed and leaned back in his expensive ergonomic chair, clasping his hands behind his head. He looked at me with the expression a parent uses for a child who is asking why the sky is blue. "The market has changed, Piper," he said. "That is the going rate for new talent in tech right now. If we want to attract people, we have to pay market value. It is just economics." "So I am below market value?" I asked. If the market rate for a junior analyst is 96,000, then the market rate for a senior specialist should be at least 120,000. When is my adjustment coming? He laughed. It was a short, dry sound. It does not work like that. You are on an existing compensation track. We cannot just double your salary. Internal equity rules prevent jumps like that. Besides, Harper is coming in with a different skill set. She knows the new cloud protocols. I taught myself the cloud protocols, I shot back. I implemented the Azure migration last year while you were on vacation. Brent's face hardened. The friendly mask slipped, revealing the cold corporate operator underneath. He leaned forward, placing his elbows on the desk. Listen to me. Piper, he said, his voice dropping to a serious, confidential tone. You are looking at this the wrong way. You get excellent performance reviews, right? Every year. I give you exceeds expectations. Do you know why? I waited. Because I keep you in a position where you can win, he said. I keep you in a stable role where I know you can handle the workload. If I promoted you or adjusted your title to match these new market rates, the expectations would skyrocket. You would be under a microscope. I am protecting you. You have a safe, steady job here because I value your stability. The words hit me harder than the salary figure. He was not protecting me. He was anchoring me. I realized in that moment that my high performance reviews were not a badge of honor. They were a leash. He gave me high scores because I was overqualified and underpaid. I was a bargain. I was a Ferrari being sold for the price of a Honda. And he was the one driving it. He had no intention of ever paying me what I was worth because he knew I would do the work for cheap. I was the safe option, the stable option, the one who would never leave because she was too grateful to be there. I see, I said. So I am being punished for being reliable. You are being paid to be reliable, he corrected. Now, please shred that letter on your way out. And Piper, do not discuss salaries with the new hires. It breeds toxicity. I walked out of his office. I did not go to the shredder. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and placed the letter in my bag. I did not cry. I did not go to the bathroom to hyperventilate. I felt a cold, metallic resolve settle in my chest. If he wanted to talk about stability and rules, we would talk about rules. I unlocked my workstation. I opened a new folder on my personal drive and named it simply Documentation. I began to dig. I had access to the department shared drive where the budget proposals were stored. It was a folder that technically I was not supposed to look at. But 8 years ago, Tracy had given me read-only access to help format spreadsheets, and no one had ever revoked it. I opened the file for the current fiscal year. I scanned the rows. I found Harper's line item, approved. Then I looked back. I looked at Kendra Pike, who I had trained 3 years ago. Her starting salary had been $82,000. Currently, she was making $88,000. I looked at Noah Vance, hired last year. Starting salary $91,000. I looked at my own line item, beside my name. In the column for market adjustment, there was a 0. In the notes column, there was a comment. Budget constraint. Employee at cap. But that was not the twist. The twist was the signature at the bottom of the approval forms. For every single high salary for Harper, for Kendra, for Noah, there was a digital signature authorizing the expenditure. It was not HR. It was not the CFO. It was Brent Kavanaugh. He had personally signed off on every single dollar given to the people I trained. He had looked at the budget, seen the disparity, and signed his name anyway. And on my annual review forms, the ones where I begged for a raise higher than 3%, he had written comments like, "Department budget is frozen and must adhere to corporate cap." He had lied. It was not the company. It was not the market. It was him. He had decided that I was the workhorse who did not need to be fed, while he used the budget to buy shiny new show ponies to make his department look modern. I printed every single page. I printed the budget sheets. I printed the email threads where I had asked for a raise and he had denied it. I printed my exceeds expectations reviews. I printed the offer letter for Harper Sloan. I took a manila folder from my drawer and labeled it with today's date. I placed the stack of papers inside. My hands were steady now. The shock had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp anger that felt like a blade. Market changed, I whispered to myself, repeating his words. Adapt. He was right. The market had changed, and I was about to adapt in a way he never saw coming. I was not going to storm into his office and quit. I was not going to make a scene. That is what an emotional amateur would do. I was a professional. I was a senior ops system specialist. My job was to identify system failures, document the root cause, and execute a correction. Brent Kavanaugh was the system failure, and I had just started the root cause analysis. The betrayal did not happen all at once. It was not a single knife in the back. It was a slow, methodical dismantling of my professional identity, performed with a smile and a handshake. I had spent the last 3 years training Kendra Pike and the last 12 months training Noah Vance. They were decent people. They were polite. They brought donuts on Fridays and remembered my birthday. But they were also the instruments of my obsolescence. Kendra had come to me fresh from a marketing analytics role. Not knowing the difference between a server and a switch, I sat with her for 6 weeks, walking her through the architecture of our network. I wrote her cheat sheets. I showed her how to bypass the glitchy login script that IT refused to fix. 2 years later, she was promoted to senior operations lead. Noah was even greener. He was a lateral hire from sales who wanted to get technical. I taught him SQL. I taught him how to query the database without crashing the production environment. Just last month, I had to stop him from deleting a critical table because he confused the drop command with the delete command. Yet, on Monday morning, an announcement email went out to the entire division. Noah Vance had been promoted to Senior Systems Architect. I stared at the screen. Senior Systems Architect. That was a title 2 tiers above mine. I looked across the open plan office. Noah was sitting at his desk, struggling to connect his wireless mouse. This was the man who was now technically my superior. This was the man who was now earning a salary that likely eclipsed mine by $40,000, based on the pay bands I had researched. I stood up and walked to Brent's office. The door was open. He was typing on his laptop, looking busy and important. "Do you have a minute?" I asked. He waved me in without looking up. "Make it quick. Piper, I have a strategy sync with the CIO in 15 minutes. I sat down. I did not fidget. I had practiced this conversation in the mirror. "I saw the announcement about Noah," I said, "and I know about Kendra's promotion last year. I have been here 8 years. I have trained both of them. I am still a senior specialist. I want to know why I have not been moved to a lead or architect role." Brent stopped typing. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and frustration, the way one looks at a car that refuses to start on a cold morning. "Piper," he began, his voice dropping to that confidential, fatherly tone he loved to use. "You have to understand the ecosystem here. Promoting you is complicated." "Why?" I asked. "My metrics are perfect. My uptime record is 100%. "Exactly," he said, pointing a finger at me as if I had just proven his point. "That is the problem. You are too good at what you do. If I move you to an architect role, you would be focusing on high-level design. You would be in meetings all day. Who would handle the fires? Who would manage the legacy integration?" He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "You are the keystone. Piper, if I pull you out of your current spot, the whole arch collapses. The team falls apart. Kendra and Noah are great at the broad strokes, but they cannot do what you do. You are too important to move." I sat there, absorbing the words. It sounded like a compliment. He was calling me vital. He was calling me indispensable. But as the words settled in my stomach, they turned sour. This was not a compliment. It was a cage. He was telling me that because I was competent, I was unpromotable, because I was the only one who bothered to learn how the engine actually worked. I was condemned to stay in the engine room forever, shoveling coal while everyone else enjoyed the view from the bridge. He was punishing me for my own proficiency. "So," I said slowly, "because I am the only one who can do the work, I am not allowed to advance." "It is not about not allowed," Brent said. checking his watch. It is about resource allocation. I need my best player on the field, not in the coaching box. Look, we can talk about a spot bonus at the end of the year, but right now, I need you focused on the audit prep. I walked out of his office. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. I realized then that I had been played. I had been playing the game by the rules of meritocracy: work hard, become indispensable, get rewarded. But Brent was playing by the rules of convenience. He had realized that it was cheaper and safer to keep me exactly where I was. I went back to my desk, but I could not work. My mind was racing. If Noah was now a senior systems architect, he had to have a justification file. HR required a business case for promotion form to be filed for any title change. I knew where those forms were stored. Technically, they were in a restricted folder on the operations drive, but restricted in our company usually just meant hidden in a subfolder, and I had administrator privileges for backup purposes. I did not hack anything. I simply navigated to the directory operations, HR, promos, current fiscal year. I found the file, Vance Noah Sirarch Justification, PDF. I opened it. The document was 5 pages long. It detailed Noah's leadership skills, his strategic vision, and his project completions. I scrolled down to the section titled Key Achievements. The first bullet point read, led the successful migration of the Q3 legacy server consolidation, resulting in a 15% reduction in latency. I stopped breathing for a second. The Q3 legacy server consolidation. I remembered that project vividly. It had been a nightmare. The old servers were incompatible with the new architecture. I had spent 3 weekends in a row at the office, manually rewriting the scripts because the automated tools had failed. I had ordered Thai food at 11 at night on a Saturday while Noah was at a bachelor party in Nashville. Noah had not written a single line of code for that migration. He had attended 2 status meetings where he nodded and asked if we were on track. I read the next bullet point. Designed and implemented the new vendor access protocol to streamline third-party onboarding. That was my design. I had drawn the flowchart on the whiteboard. I had written the policy. I had configured the firewall rules. Noah had simply forwarded the email announcing it was done. I scrolled to the bottom of the document. There was no mention of me. My name was nowhere in the file. The work I had done, the late nights, the stress, the technical problem-solving had been stripped of my identity and pasted onto Noah's resume like a stolen badge of honor. And at the bottom, in the approval box, was the signature Brent Kavanaugh, VP of Operations. Brent knew. He had to know. He was the one who approved my overtime during the migration. He knew Noah was in Nashville, but he had signed this document claiming Noah did the work. Why? Because Noah looked the part. Noah was tall, charismatic, and played golf. Noah was the kind of guy Brent could take to a client dinner. I was just the mechanic, and in Brent's world, mechanics did not get to be architects. I closed the file. I did not print it this time. Printing it would leave a record on the print server. Instead, I saved a copy to my encrypted thumb drive. I needed to understand the mechanics of this theft. I began to track the workflow of credit in our department. I opened my calendar and cross-referenced it with the department meeting minutes. 3 weeks ago, there was a presentation to the board of directors regarding operational efficiency. I was not invited. I looked at the slide deck, which was attached to the meeting invite. Slide 4, Automated Error Logging System. I had built that system. It was my Python script running on the back end. The presenter listed on the slide Kendra Pike. Slide 7. Cost reduction via cloud optimization. I had negotiated those reserved instances with Amazon Web Services. I had done the math. The presenter Brent Kavanaugh. I was a ghost. I was haunting the machine, keeping it alive, while the living people feasted on the credit. I needed one last confirmation. I needed to know if this was truly just Brent, or if the company policy actually prohibited me from advancing. I scheduled a confidential inquiry with HR. I met with a woman named Sarah from the compensation team. She was young and looked tired. I have a question about salary bands, I said. I am a senior specialist. I have been told that I am at the cap for my role, and that moving to an architect role is difficult due to team structure. Is there a corporate policy that limits the number of architects in a department? Sarah typed something into her computer. No, she said, frowning. There is no hard cap on headcount for architects. It is based on budget and management discretion. If a manager can justify the business need, they can open the role. And the salary cap, I asked? Is there a hard stop for my current title? There is a midpoint, she explained, but we can go up to 120% of the midpoint for high performers. Are you at the max? She looked at my file on her screen. Her eyebrows went up. You are at the 25th percentile for your band, she said quietly. You are nowhere near the cap, Piper. You actually have significant room for growth within your current title, let alone a promotion. So, if my manager told me I was capped, I said, my voice steady, that would be incorrect. Sarah looked uncomfortable. It might be that his specific department budget is capped, but from a corporate policy standpoint, no, you are underpaid relative to your tenure and performance rating. Thank you, I said. That is all I needed to know. I walked back to my desk. The office was buzzing with the afternoon energy. Noah was laughing loudly at a joke Brent had just told. Kendra was showing someone photos of her new car, a car she bought with the salary that should have been mine. I looked at them, and for the first time in 8 years, I did not feel the urge to work harder. I did not feel the urge to prove myself. The illusion of the team had shattered completely. I saw them for what they were, parasites, and I saw Brent for what he was, the host who was feeding me to them. He thought he had me trapped. He thought that by calling me indispensable, he could keep me in the basement forever. He thought that I would keep fixing the engines, keep putting out the fires, and keep letting him sign his name to my work because I was too scared to leave. He was wrong. I opened my notebook. I turned to a fresh page. I wrote down the date. I did not want to scream. I did not want to slash tires. I did not want to make a scene in the break room. Those were the reactions of a victim. I was not a victim anymore. I was an auditor. I looked at the incident response policy on my second monitor. I looked at the code of conduct regarding intellectual property and honest representation of work. I do not need revenge, I whispered to the humming silence of my cubicle. I need something scarier. I need the truth, and I need it with a signature. I picked up my pen. It was time to stop fixing the system and start documenting its collapse. The atmosphere in the office shifted as we approached the end of the fiscal quarter. It was no longer just the usual stress of hitting targets. It was the looming shadow of the external compliance audit. The company had hired a top-tier firm to review our operational integrity, and the word came down from the C-suite that we needed to be bulletproof. For me, this meant one thing: locking down the perimeter. I was appointed as the primary administrator for the vendor access portal and the contract approval system. It was a tedious, thankless task that involved reviewing permission sets and ensuring that every digital door had a lock on it. I took the assignment seriously. I implemented a strict least privilege model. In simple terms, it meant that nobody got keys to the entire building if they only needed to enter the mailroom. I rolled out multi-factor authentication for every user with approval authority. I also instituted a new protocol called the privileged access request. If a manager wanted to override a system check or access sensitive financial data, they could no longer just click a button. They had to submit a formal request. They had to state the reason. They had to set a time limit for their access, usually 2 or 4 hours, and most importantly, they had to acknowledge that their session would be recorded. The engineering team grumbled but understood. The finance team actually thanked me for the extra layer of security, Brent Kavanaugh, however, took it as a personal insult. He stopped by my desk on a Thursday afternoon, tapping his knuckles on the partition wall. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp with irritation. "Piper," he said, skipping the pleasantries. "This new access protocol is killing my workflow. I tried to approve a purchase order this morning and the system asked me for a justification code. I am the vice president. My justification is that I said so." It is for the audit, Brent, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. The auditors look for segregation of duties. If you have permanent, unrestricted admin access, it gets flagged as a high risk. We have to show that high-level access is only granted on a temporary as-needed basis. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It is slowing everything down. We have deals moving fast. I cannot be waiting for a ticket to clear every time I need to sign a document. Can't you just whitelist my account? Create a permanent exception. I cannot, I said. The system is hard-coded for the audit period. Even I do not have a permanent exception. Everything is logged. He stared at me for a moment, his jaw tight. Fine. Just make sure you are monitoring the queue. I do not want to be waiting hours for approval. He walked away, clearly unhappy that his kingdom now had speed bumps. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and anxiety. I was not trying to antagonize him, but I was also done making his life easier at the expense of my own integrity. 2 days later, the real test arrived. It came in the form of an urgent notification on my dashboard. A new contract had been uploaded to the system, flagged with the highest priority level, critical, immediate action required. I opened the ticket. The contract value was staggering, $1,200,000. The vendor was a company I had never heard of called Blue Hearth Consulting. The scope of work was vague. The description simply read, Strategic Operational Advisory and Logistics Optimization. That was corporate speak for absolutely nothing. It was the kind of description you used when you wanted to bill for hours without producing a tangible deliverable. I checked the timestamp. The contract had been uploaded 10 minutes ago by Noah Vance, acting on behalf of Brent. Attached to the contract was a frantic note: Brent needs this approved by EOD. Vendor needs down payment to start Monday. I frowned. A $1 million contract with a brand new vendor, requiring immediate approval, right before the quarter closed in the world of fraud detection. This was not just a red flag. It was a siren blaring in an empty room. I did not hit approve. Instead, I did what I always did. I dug. I opened a separate browser window and searched for Blue Hearth Consulting. There was a website, but it was generic. It used stock photos of people shaking hands and looking at graphs. There were no case studies. There were no client testimonials. I ran a Who Is domain lookup. The website domain had been registered exactly 3 days ago. My heart started to beat a little faster. A company that did not exist last week was about to receive a contract worth over $1 million. I pulled up the vendor intake form attached to the contract. I looked at the physical address. It was listed as a suite in an office park in Delaware. I pulled it up on Google Maps. The suite was a mailbox rental store in a strip mall, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. Then I looked at the contact information. The authorized representative for Blue Hearth Consulting was listed as a man named Lucas Kavanaugh. I froze. Kavanaugh. I stared at the name on the screen. It was not Smith or Jones. It was Brent's last name. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. It could be a coincidence. Kavanaugh was not a unique name, but in this context, a shell company with a brand new domain, a mailbox address, and a representative sharing the vice president's surname, asking for $1 million in a rush. It looked like embezzlement. It looked like Brent was trying to funnel money out of the company to a relative before the fiscal year ended. I needed to be sure. I needed more than just a suspicion. But before I could dig deeper, my desk phone rang. It was Brent. "Piper," he barked. "Why is the Blue Hearth contract still pending? I told Noah to mark it urgent." "I am reviewing it now." "Brent," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It is a new vendor. The system requires a verification check for any new entity over $50,000. This is over $1 million. I have already vetted them," he snapped. "They are a specialized firm I worked with previously. They are giving us a discount if we sign today. You are holding up a strategic initiative." "The system flagged some discrepancies," I said, testing the waters. "The domain is new, and the address comes up as a mailbox rental." There was a pause on the other line, a silence that lasted just a second too long. "They are a startup," Brent said. his voice smoother now, more persuasive. They work remotely. Look, Piper, I do not have time for you to play detective. I am the VP of Operations. I am authorizing this. I need you to grant the approval rights so I can sign the release. He was asking me to bypass the controls. He wanted me to open the gate so he could push the money through. I cannot just grant approval rights on a flagged vendor, I said. The audit protocols block it. Then give me the admin access, he demanded. Give me full admin rights for the next hour. I will go in, override the flag, and sign it myself. I will take the responsibility. He was walking right into the trap, and he did not even know it. I cannot give you full admin rights, Brent, I said. That violates the segregation of duties. If I give you the keys to the back end, we fail the audit. I do not care about the audit right now, he shouted. I care about this deal. Give me access. I can offer you a compromise, I said, my voice calm and helpful. I can enable the break glass account for you. What is that? It is an emergency access protocol, I explained. It gives you temporary elevated privileges to override system blocks. It is designed for critical failures when the primary admin is unavailable or when a VP needs to intervene. Fine, he said. Do that. Do it now. Just so you know, I added. The break glass account automatically enables the highest level of logging. It records every click, every keystroke, and every file modified. It sends a real-time report to the compliance server. It is just a safety feature. I do not care what it records, he said dismissively. Just give me the login so I can get this done. Okay, I said. I will provision the account. You will receive the credentials in 5 minutes. Finally, he muttered, and hung up. I put the phone down. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from the adrenaline of the gamble. I had just handed him a loaded gun. He thought the break glass account was a workaround. He thought it was a way to bypass me. He did not realize that by using it, he was about to create an immutable forensic record of his own crime. I verified the settings on the account. I ensured that the session recording was active. I ensured that the IP tracking was enabled. Then, I sent him the credentials. I watched the logs on my second monitor. User emergency admin 01 logged in. IP address internal network, executive wing. Action override. Vendor flag. Blue Hearth Consulting. Action approve contract. $200,000. Action initiate payment requisition. He was doing it. He was forcing the contract through, ignoring the warnings I had placed on the file, and every single step was being written into a read-only database that the auditors would review next week. He thought I was an obstacle. He thought I was just a bureaucratic annoyance standing between him and his money. He did not understand that I was not the wall. I was the camera. I took a screenshot of the active session log. I saved it to my encrypted drive, right next to the salary data and the promotion justifications. The puzzle pieces were coming together. The motive was greed. The method was arrogance. And now, I had the weapon. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of water. The office around me was bustling with the end-of-day rush. People were laughing, talking about weekend plans. They had no idea that $1 million was currently moving through the wires to a mailbox in Delaware, authorized by a man who shared a last name with the recipient. Go ahead, Brent, I whispered. Approved. The days following the approval of the Blue Hearth contract were defined by a suffocating, silent hostility. Brent did not yell. He did not throw things. Instead, he initiated a campaign of quiet bureaucratic violence designed to break my will. It began with the workload. On Friday morning, my inbox flooded with automated task assignments. Brent had gone into the project management system and reassigned every low-priority, high-labor ticket from the last 6 months to my queue. These were not strategic tasks. They were digital janitorial work. He wanted me to manually verify the metadata for 3,000 archived client files. He wanted me to reformat the legacy backup logs from 2 years ago. The deadline for all of these tasks was set for Monday morning at 8 o'clock. He was trying to bury me. He wanted me to be so exhausted, so overwhelmed by the sheer volume of mindless data entry that I would make a mistake. And when I made that mistake, he would be waiting with a disciplinary form. I did not complain. I did not storm into his office to ask why the senior systems specialist was doing the work of an intern. I simply put on my noise-canceling headphones, opened a fresh spreadsheet, and began to work. I knew that in a war of attrition, the person who loses their temper first loses the battle. But Brent was impatient. The busy work was just the jab. He was looking for an opening to land the knockout hook. It came on Tuesday afternoon via the internal instant messaging system. A chat window popped up on my screen. It was Brent. "Piper, I am locked out of the approval queue again. The system is glitching. Shoot me your password real quick so I can verify the settings from your view. I do not want to open a ticket and wait." I stared at the message. It was casual. It was colloquial. It was designed to look like a minor request between colleagues. Just a quick favor to keep the business moving. But it was a trap. If I gave him my password, I would be violating the cardinal rule of our security policy. If I gave him my password, he could log in as me. He could delete the logs of the Blue Hearth contract approval. He could approve more fraudulent payments. And this time, the digital fingerprint would belong to Piper Foster, not Brent Kavanaugh. He was trying to frame me. I took a screenshot of the chat window. Then, I typed my reply carefully. "Brent, I cannot share my password. Corporate Information Security Policy Section 4.1 explicitly forbids credential sharing under any circumstances. If you are having access issues, I can open a high-priority ticket for you, or we can do a screen share session." I hit send. His response was immediate. The 3 dots of the typing indicator did not even appear. He must have been hovering over his keyboard. "Stop quoting the handbook at me. This is an operational directive. I am your vice president. Do as you are told." I took another screenshot. "I cannot comply with a directive that violates security compliance." I wrote back. The chat window went silent. 10 minutes later, I received a calendar invitation. Subject performance correction, insubordination. The meeting was set for 30 minutes from now. He was moving fast. I walked into his office at the appointed time. He was sitting behind his desk, a single sheet of paper in front of him. He looked calm, almost regretful. It was a performance, and he was the star. "Sit down, Piper," he said. I sat. "I am disappointed," he began. "I have tried to be flexible with you. I have tried to protect you from the complexities of the business, but your refusal to cooperate with simple management requests has become a problem. You are obstructing operations." He slid the paper across the desk. It was a formal written warning. The box for insubordination was checked. "This is your first official warning," he said, his voice dropping to a serious, heavy tone. "If there is another incident, I will be forced to put you on a performance improvement plan, and frankly, Piper, if you cannot handle the pace of the day shift, maybe you would be better suited for the night shift support role. We have an opening in the server maintenance team. Shifts start at midnight." The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. The night shift, that was the graveyard of careers. It was where they sent the people they wanted to quit. You sat in a cold, windowless basement monitoring blinking lights while the rest of the world slept. You were invisible. You were irrelevant. He was telling me that if I did not let him bypass the rules, he would banish me to the dark. "I understand your position," I said. I did not sign the paper. I picked it up. "May I have a copy of this?" "It will go in your file," he said. "But you can take that one." I stood up. "Thank you. Brent." I walked back to my desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs. But my mind was crystal clear. He had made a tactical error. He had put his retaliation in writing. I opened my email client. I drafted a new message. I placed Brent in the to field. Then, in the CC field, I added 2 addresses. One was the Human Resources business partner for our division. The other was the general mailbox for the Information Security Office. Subject rewritten warning. Password sharing request. I began to type. "Dear Brent, I am writing to formally acknowledge the written warning I received today regarding insubordination. To ensure the record is accurate, I want to clarify the specific incident that led to this disciplinary action. At 2:30 in the afternoon, you requested via instant message that I provide you with my personal login credentials password to access the approval system. I declined this request, citing Corporate Policy Section 4.1, which prohibits credential sharing. Following my refusal to violate this security protocol, you issued this written warning and verbally threatened to transfer me to the night shift support team. I have attached screenshots of our chat conversation for reference. I am copying the information security team here to ensure they are aware that I have maintained compliance with our access policies, despite the pressure to do otherwise. Regards, Piper Foster, Senior Ops Systems Specialist. I attached the screenshots. I hovered the mouse over the send button. This was the point of no return. Once I sent this, I was declaring open war. I was dragging the shadows into the light. I clicked send. The email whooshed away. I sat back and watched the clock. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, at exactly 8 minutes past the hour. My desk phone rang. It was Brent. I put it on speakerphone, but I did not answer immediately. I let it ring twice. Then I picked up. "This is Piper," I said. "Piper." Brent's voice was tight. It lacked the smooth confidence from the meeting. "I just saw your email. You did not need to copy the security team on that." "I thought it was relevant," I said cheerfully. "Since the write-up was about my refusal to share credentials, they need to know that the integrity of my account is still intact." "You are blowing this out of proportion," he said, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "I was testing you. It was a security drill. I wanted to see if you would actually give up the password. You passed the test. The write-up was a formality. I am going to shred it." "Oh," I said. "That is good to know. But I already sent the email. It is part of the server record now." There was a long silence on the other end. He knew what that meant. Even if he shredded the paper warning, the email was archived. The security team would see that a vice president had demanded a password and then punished an employee for refusing. It was a compliance nightmare. "You are playing a dangerous game, Piper," he whispered. The pretense of the test vanished. "You think a few emails will save you? I run this department. I can make your life very difficult." "I am just following policy. Brent," I said. "Is there anything else?" He hung up. The line went dead with a sharp click. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. My hands were trembling slightly. It was terrifying, standing up to a man who held my livelihood in his hands. But it was also exhilarating. For the first time, I wasn't just taking the hits, I was hitting back. My cell phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message. I looked at the screen. It was from Kendra Pike. "Be careful. Piper, I saw him storm out of his office. He looks murderous. Don't fight him. Brent never loses. He buried the last guy who tried to cross him." I looked at the message, feeling a pang of sadness. Kendra was a good person, but she was afraid. She had seen what happened to people who stood in Brent's way. She thought resistance was futile because she played by the social rules of the office, where popularity and power dictated the winner. But we were not playing a social game anymore. We were playing a forensic one. I did not reply to Kendra. I did not want to involve her. I turned back to my computer. I minimized the email window and opened my file explorer. I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. I named it Access Audit Logs. I dragged the screenshot of the chat into the folder. I dragged the copy of the email I had just sent. I dragged the digital copy of the written warning he had given me. Then, I went back to the system logs. I started pulling the access records for the Blue Hearth contract. I pulled the IP addresses. I pulled the timestamps. I was building a mosaic of corruption. Each file was a tile, alone. They looked like simple administrative errors or management disputes. But when you put them all together, they formed a picture of systematic fraud and abuse of power. Brent thought he could intimidate me into silence. He thought he could use the fear of the night shift to make me compliant. He did not understand that he had just given me the final piece of motivation I needed. He wanted a war fine, but I was not going to fight him with shouts or arguments in a conference room. I was going to fight him with timestamps, with server logs, and with the cold, hard, indisputable facts that he had so carelessly left behind. I was going to use the very system he exploited to dismantle him, piece by piece. The meeting invite I sent was deliberately vague yet alarming. I titled it, Operational Role Alignment and Access Governance Risk. It was the kind of subject line that lawyers and compliance officers could not ignore. On Wednesday morning, I walked into the executive conference room on the top floor. This was not the glass bowl where Brent had screamed at me. This was the inner sanctum, a room with heavy soundproofing, dark wood paneling, and no windows to the hallway. Sitting at the table were Mallory Keene, the Director of Human Resources, and Victor Haynes, the Head of Corporate Compliance. Mallory looked weary. She had her notebook open and a pen poised, clearly expecting a standard employee grievance about a bad manager. Victor, on the other hand, looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. He was a man who spoke in regulations and lived for audits. "Good morning, Piper," Mallory said, her tone professional but guarded. "You requested this time to discuss a risk to the organization. That is a heavy phrase. Do you want to walk us through it?" I sat down. I did not bring my laptop. Instead, I placed a 3-inch binder on the table. It made a solid thud that seemed to echo in the quiet room. "Thank you for seeing me," I began. "I want to be clear from the start. This is not a complaint about my salary, and it is not a complaint about a personality conflict. This is about a systematic breakdown of our internal controls, orchestrated by a senior executive to bypass security protocols." Victor leaned forward. His interest piqued. "Go on." I opened the binder. The first section was the timeline I had constructed. "For the last 8 years, I have been the primary gatekeeper for our operational systems," I explained. "I manage the vendor portals, the payment gateways, and the user access logs, as you can see from my performance reviews here." I pointed to the documents. "I have been rated as exceeding expectations for 5 consecutive years. Yet, my compensation has been artificially suppressed, and my title has remained stagnant despite my responsibilities expanding to cover architectural duties." Mallory sighed. "Piper, we can discuss a compensation review, but calling it artificial suppression is a strong accusation." "It is relevant to the risk, Mallory," I countered. "I believe I was kept in this position specifically because Brent Kavanaugh viewed me as a safe pair of hands. He believed that because I was underpaid and undervalued, I would be grateful for my job and compliant with his requests. He needed someone in the gatekeeper role who he thought he could control." I flipped the page to the salary data I had uncovered, showing the disparity between myself, Harper Sloan, and the people I had trained. "When I began to question this disparity," I continued, "the dynamic changed. When I refused to bypass safety protocols for speed, the hostility began. But the real issue is not how he treats me. It is what he is asking me to do." I turned the page to the section labeled Incident Reports. "Last week, Brent demanded that I share my personal password with him via instant message so he could access the approval queue under my identity," I said. "When I refused, citing Policy 4.1, he issued me a written warning for insubordination." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Do you have proof of this request? A manager asking for a subordinate's password is a critical violation of our information security standard." "I do," I said. I slid the printed screenshots across the table. They showed the chat log clearly. "Shoot me your password real quick." "Stop quoting the handbook. Do as you are told." Victor picked up the paper. He read it twice. His expression did not change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This is unacceptable," Victor said quietly. "Regardless of his rank, he cannot demand credentials. It compromises the non-repudiation of our logs. If he logs in as you, we cannot prove who took an action." "Exactly," I said. "And that brings me to the vendor anomaly." I laid out the Blue Hearth consulting documents. I showed them the domain registration date. I showed them the mailbox address. I showed them the break glass account logs where Brent had forced the approval through. I believe the pressure to obtain my password was an attempt to cover his tracks on future transactions. I stated, "If he uses my account, any fraudulent approval looks like my mistake, not his malfeasance." Mallory looked pale. She was looking at the Blue Hearth contract value, $1.2 million. This is a lot of information. Piper, Mallory said, "we need to verify this independently." Victor held up a hand. He looked at me with a gaze that was sharp and assessing. He was no longer looking at me as just a witness. He was looking at me as a variable in a complex equation. "We have actually been looking into the operations logs ourselves, Piper," Victor said. "Since you copied the security inbox on your email regarding the write-up, my team ran a preliminary scan of the department's activity." My stomach tightened. And we found something disturbing," Victor said. He opened a folder he had brought with him. He slid a report toward me. It was a log of high-level administrative access. "We found multiple instances of the Ops super admin account logging in during off hours over the last 3 months," Victor said. "This account has root access to the vendor master file. It has the ability to change bank account details for payees. And according to our records, Piper, you are the custodian of the Ops super admin password." I stared at the log. The login times were erratic. 2 in the morning, 11 at night, Sunday afternoons. "I am the custodian," I admitted, "but I vault that password. It is only used for system emergencies. I did not make these logins." "The logins originated from a remote connection," Victor said. "They bypass the standard VPN. If we go by the book, Piper, the fact that your custodial account was used to access the vendor file implies that you were either complicit in these changes or you were negligent in securing the credentials." The trap had snapped shut. Brent had been busy. He must have shoulder-surfed me. Or perhaps he had found the physical safe combination years ago when Tracy was still here. He had been using the super admin account, the one account that was shared for emergencies, to do his dirty work. And because I was the assigned guardian of that account, the blame fell squarely on my shoulders. Mallory looked at me with pity. "Piper, if this account was used to facilitate the Blue Hearth payments, and you are the only one who is supposed to have the password, this looks very bad for you. You could be seen as an accomplice." I felt the blood drain from my face. This was why he was so confident. He knew that if an investigation ever happened, the digital footprint would lead back to the generic admin account that I managed. He had set me up as the fall guy months ago. I took a deep breath. Panic would not save me. Logic would. "I did not authorize those sessions," I said firmly. "And I can prove it." "How?" Victor asked. "The credential was used successfully." "The password is only half the key," I said. "Every device that connects to our network leaves a digital fingerprint: the MAC address, the browser user agent string, the screen resolution. Even if he spoofed the IP address, he cannot easily spoof the hardware signature of the laptop." I pointed to the log Victor had provided. "Look at the user agent column," I said. "My work laptop is a Dell Latitude running the standard corporate image. My screen resolution is set to 1920 by 1080. I tap the paper. These logins show a resolution of 2560 by 1600. That is a Retina display. That is a MacBook." Victor looked down at the report. He adjusted his glasses. "We do not issue MacBooks to the operations team," Mallory noted. "We are a window shop." "Exactly," I said. "But the executives have a bring-your-own-device allowance. Brent uses a personal MacBook Pro for his travel. I have seen him use it in meetings." I looked Victor dead in the eye. "I am formally requesting a legal hold on all server logs, specifically the DHCP leases and the VPN concentrator logs for the last 90 days, I said, using the legal terminology that triggered an immediate preservation order. "I want you to map the IP addresses of those super admin logins to the device fingerprints. If you cross-reference that with the Wi-Fi access logs from the executive wing, you will see that the device accessing the admin account is the same device that logs into Brent's personal email." Victor sat back. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. He respected the technical maneuver. I had just given him the roadmap to catch a ghost. A legal hold is a serious step, Victor said. It freezes our data retention policies. It means we have to notify the legal department immediately. Then notify them, I said, because if you don't, and if that data gets overwritten in the nightly purge, then this company is bearing evidence of internal fraud. And I will not be the one going down for a crime I did not commit. Mallory looked at Victor. Victor, is she right? Can we trace the device? If the logs are still there, Victor said. Yes, we can match the hardware ID. He closed his folder. We will initiate the hold, Victor said. But Piper, you need to understand the position you are in. Until we clear this up, you are a person of interest in an active investigation regarding financial misconduct. We cannot have you managing the systems while we audit them. I understand, I said. We are going to have to place you on administrative leave, Mallory said softly. Paid, of course, but you will have to hand over your badge and your laptop. You will need to be escorted out of the building. It was the standard procedure. It was exactly what Brent would want. He would see me being walked out by security and think he had won. He would think I was being fired. He would think the super admin frame job had worked. But he was wrong. I stood up. I will hand over my equipment, but I want one thing on the record. What is that? Mallory asked. The truth is in the logs, I said. You have the map now. Do not stop digging until you find the device that matches that screen resolution. When you find that MacBook, you find your thief. I handed my badge to Mallory. It felt heavy, like handing over a piece of my identity. I had worked here for 8 years. I had built these systems, and now I was being walked out like a criminal. But as I walked to the door, I did not feel defeated. I felt dangerous. I was leaving the building, but I had left a time bomb behind me. I had forced compliance to look at the hardware data. Brent could lie. He could charm. He could fake approvals. But he could not change the fact that his personal laptop had been used to log into a restricted account at 2 a.m. He thought the password was the key. He forgot that the machine itself tells a story. We will be in touch, Piper, Victor said. Keep your phone on. I will, I said. And Victor checked the procurement logs for who authorized the reimbursement for a MacBook Pro 3 months ago. I have a feeling you will find Brent's signature on that, too. I walked out of the conference room. The hallway was long and quiet. I kept my head high. The game had moved from the minor leagues of office politics to the major leagues of forensic investigation, and for the first time, I wasn't just the goalie. I was the coach. The silence in my apartment was louder than the chaos of the server room. I had been home for 3 hours, sitting on my couch in the same clothes I had worn to the compliance meeting. My badge was gone, surrendered to Mallory Keene, but the phantom weight of it still hung around my neck. I felt exposed, like a soldier who had been stripped of their armor and left on the battlefield. My personal cell phone sat on the coffee table. It was the only tether I had left to the world I had built for 8 years. I kept waiting for it to ring, expecting Victor Haynes to call and tell me they had found the hardware match, or for HR to call and tell me I was fired. When it finally buzzed at 7 p.m, the name on the screen made my stomach turn. It was Brent. I let it ring 3 times. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity and a need to gauge his state of mind won out. I picked it up, but said nothing. Piper, his voice came through the speaker, smooth and terrifyingly calm. I am glad you picked up. I wanted to call you before the day ended. I am on administrative leave. Brent, I said, I am not supposed to be talking to you. That is just a formality, he said, dismissing the HR investigation with a casual laugh. Listen, I think things got out of hand today. Emotions were high. We both said things we did not mean. I want you to know that I do not want you to lose your job over this. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was trying to pivot, to rewrite the narrative of the last 48 hours. He wanted me to believe that we were just 2 colleagues having a spat, not a whistleblower and a fraudster locked in a legal death spiral. I told the truth to compliance, I said. There is no misunderstanding. You are confused, he said, his voice dropping to a lower, More intimate register. You are under a lot of stress. You are seeing ghosts in the machine. Look, Piper, just come in tomorrow. We will sit down, we will clear up the logs, and we will get that Blue Hearth payment sorted out. The CFO is asking questions about the delay. If we fix it together, this whole investigation goes away. I cannot fix it, I said. I do not have access. We can work around that, he said quickly, too quickly. Just think about it. We are a team. Remember? He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was scared. He needed that payment to go through before the quarter closed, which was only 24 hours away. If the money did not move, his deal with the shell company would collapse, and he would be left with a signed contract and no cash flow to show for it. He needed my access, and since he could not get it from me voluntarily, he was going to take it. 2 hours later, the attack began. I was in the kitchen making tea when my phone lit up with a notification from the corporate authenticator app. It was a push notification that usually appeared when I was trying to log in. Approve sign-in, location Columbus, Ohio, device unknown. I hit deny. A second later, another notification. Approve sign-in. I hit deny again. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Someone was trying to brute force my account. They had my username. They likely had a cracked version of my password, or Brent had guessed it based on what he knew of me. But they were stuck at the multi-factor authentication gate. Then, the email came through. It popped up on my personal mail app, which was still linked to the emergency alert system. Subject MFA device reset request. User Foster, Piper, requested by Admin Assistant 02. I froze. Admin Assistant 02 was the generic account used by the executive support staff. Specifically, it was the account used by Brent's executive assistant, a young woman named Sarah, who did whatever Brent told her to do. The request was asking the IT help desk to reset my multi-factor authentication settings. The justification note read, "User lost phone. Needs immediate reset to new device. If they reset the MFA, they could link a new phone, Brent's phone, to my account. Once they did that, they could log in as me, approve the wire transfer, delete the logs, and leave a digital trail that proved I was the one who moved the money." I did not hesitate. I dialed the emergency number for the Information Security Operations Center. It was a number that bypassed the standard help desk queue. "InfoSec Ops, this is David," a tired voice answered. "David, this is Piper Foster, Senior Ops Specialist," I said, speaking fast. "I am currently on administrative leave, but there is an active attack on my identity. I am looking at a ticket for an MFA reset that I did not initiate." "Whoa, slow down," David said. "What ticket number?" "I do not have the number. I just got the alert," I said. "Listen to me. You need to activate the account protection protocol on my profile immediately. Do not process any resets. Do not accept any calls from my extension." "Piper, I see the ticket," David said, the clicking of his keyboard audible in the background. "It says you lost your phone. It is flagged as urgent from the VP's office." "I am holding my phone right now," I snapped. "That is a fraudulent request. If you process that reset, you are enabling an account takeover. Check the legal hold status on my user ID. Compliance put a lock on it this morning." There was a long pause. I held my breath. If David was lazy, or if he was intimidated by Brent's title, he might just push the button. "Okay," David said slowly. "I see the legal hold tag from Victor Haynes. You are right. This account is locked down. Flag the request as a security incident," I instructed, my old instincts taking over. "And David, enable the verbal challenge phrase. No changes to my account unless the caller provides the verbal passcode." "Done," David said. "I am rejecting the ticket now. Do you want me to log the IP of the requester?" "Yes," I said. "Log everything." I hung up and sank onto the floor. It was close, too close. Brent was getting desperate. He was using his assistant to do his dirty work, trying to hijack my digital identity to finalize his theft. My phone rang again. I looked at it, expecting Brent, but it was no Avance. I hesitated. Noah was Brent's golden boy. He was the one who got the credit for my work. But he was also weak. He was a follower, not a leader. I answered. What do you want? Noah. Piper. His voice was shaky. He sounded like he was hiding in a stairwell. Look, I do not know what is going on, but Brent is losing his mind. He just came out and screamed at Sarah because the IT ticket got rejected. Why are you calling me, Noah? I asked. Because he asked me to try, Noah admitted. He wants me to call the help desk and say I am you. He gave me your employee ID number. He said he just needs to borrow your access for an hour to fix a glitch in the vendor payment system. He said you are being difficult and refusing to help the team. Borrow my access, I repeated. The phrase was so absurd it was almost funny. Noah, do you realize what he is asking you to do? Impersonating another employee to bypass security controls is a federal crime when it involves wire fraud. Wire fraud? Noah squeaked. The contract he is trying to approve is fake. Noah, I said, deciding to use him as a lever. Blue Hearth Consulting is a shell company. If you help him log in as me, you are not helping the team. You are becoming an accessory to embezzlement. There was a silence on the line so profound I thought the call had dropped. He said it was just a glitch, Noah whispered. It is not a glitch, I said. Why do you think I am on leave? Why do you think compliance locked my account? Do not let him use you, Noah. If he asks you to call it, tell him no, and then write down exactly what he asked you to do and email it to yourself. I have to go, Noah stammered. He is coming. The line went dead. I immediately opened the Notes app on my phone. I dictated the entire conversation with Noah while it was fresh. Time 9:15 p.m. Caller Noah Vance. Content admitted. Brent Kavanaugh instructed him to impersonate me to IT help desk to facilitate access bypass. I took a screenshot of the note and emailed it to my personal account. Then I emailed it to Victor Haynes at his corporate address. I was creating a paper trail that was 10 miles long. I was not going to let this become a case of he said, she said. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for the police to knock on my door, or for my bank accounts to be frozen, or for the roof to just cave in. At 6 a.m, a new email arrived. It was not from Brent. It was from the executive assistant to the chief financial officer. Subject emergency meeting. Vendor approval resolution. Time 08:00 a.m. Today, location conference room B. Attendees Brent Kavanaugh, VP Ops, Marcus Sterling CFO, Piper Foster Senior Ops Specialist. Body. Mr. Sterling requests your immediate presence to resolve the outstanding payment blockade for the Blue Hearth contract. Please bring your laptop and security token. I stared at the screen. The CFO was involved now. Marcus Sterling was a man who cared about only one thing, the bottom line. Brent must have gone to him and spun a story about how I was a rogue employee holding the company hostage, refusing to release critical funds due to a personal vendetta. He had convinced the CFO that the only way to get the deal done was to drag me into a room and order me to type in my password. They were calling me back in. I was technically suspended. I had no badge, but the CFO had the power to override HR for a business-critical emergency. I got out of bed. I showered. I put on my navy blue blazer, the one that made me look like armor. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. My eyes were rimmed with red. But there was something else in my expression. Brent thought this meeting was his victory. He thought that with the CFO in the room, I would be too intimidated to refuse. He thought that under the pressure of executive authority, I would crack and give him the keys. He did not know that I was bringing the logs. He did not know that I had already spoken to compliance. And he certainly did not know that the blockade he was complaining about was actually a trap I had set specifically for this moment. You want my password, I said to my reflection. Fine, I will bring it to you. I grabbed my bag. I did not take my laptop, Mallory still had it, but I took my thumb drive, the one with the encrypted folder, the one with the salary data, the chat logs, the break glass recordings, and the hardware fingerprints. I walked out the door and headed back to the glass cage on the 14th floor. I knew that when I walked into that room, only one of us was going to walk out with a job. And I was determined that it would be the person who followed the policy. Conference room B was smaller than the boardroom, but it felt infinitely more claustrophobic. The air conditioning was humming a low, aggressive drone that seemed to vibrate against the glass walls. Marcus Sterling, the chief financial officer, sat at the head of the table. He was a man who did not speak often, but when he did, the stock price usually moved. He was looking at his watch, then at a printed spreadsheet, then at me. I sat on the left side of the table. Brent Kavanaugh sat on the right. He looked composed, but I could see a small vein throbbing in his temple. He was tapping his pen against the mahogany surface, a frantic, rhythmic sound that betrayed his desperation. "We have a problem," Marcus said, his voice dry and devoid of emotion. "We have a pending outgoing wire for $1,200,000 to Blue Hearth Consulting. It has been sitting in the queue for 48 hours. The vendor is threatening to pull the contract. The fiscal quarter closes at 5 o'clock today. Why is this money not moving?" He looked at me. His eyes were cold, demanding an answer that involved a solution, not an explanation. "The system has flagged the vendor for compliance review," I said calmly. "There are irregularities in the domain registration and the physical address. The automated controls are preventing the release of funds." "The irregularities have been addressed," Brent interjected smoothly. He leaned forward, flashing a strained smile at the chief financial officer. "I vouched for the vendor personally. Marcus, this is a strategic partnership. The problem is not the system. The problem is the personnel managing the system." Brent turned his eyes to me. They were hard, filled with a mixture of panic and malice. "Piper has been difficult," Brent continued. "She has locked down the administrative privileges so tight that we cannot even conduct basic business. She is using the audit as an excuse to obstruct my department." Marcus frowned. "Is this true, Piper? Are you blocking a strategic initiative?" "I am enforcing the security policy, sir," I replied. "I do not have the authority to block a valid contract, but I also do not have the authority to approve a suspicious one without a secondary audit trail. We do not have time for a secondary audit trail." Brent snapped. He slammed his hand on the table, startling Marcus. "We have 4 hours to get this money out the door, or we lose the Q3 projection. This is ridiculous." Brent stood up. He walked around the table until he was standing behind the chair next to the presentation console, which was logged into the main projector. "Log in," Brent ordered, pointing at the console keyboard. "Log in right now and override the flag. I am giving you a direct order in front of the chief financial officer." I looked at Marcus. He gave a slight nod. "Just get it done, Piper. We can discuss the protocols next week. Right now, I need the transaction cleared." I stood up and walked to the console. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. This was the moment. They were forcing me to touch the keyboard. They were giving me the weapon. I typed in my username. I typed in my password. The system authenticated me. The main dashboard appeared on the massive screen behind me, visible to everyone in the room. The red flag on the Blue Hearth contract was pulsing. "There," Brent said, pointing at the screen. "Just click the override button, enter the admin key, and clear it." I hesitated. I looked at Brent. "I cannot do that. Brent," I said, "the system requires a justification code for an override. I do not have one." "Use mine," he shouted. He was losing control now. The pressure of the deadline and the presence of the CFO were cracking his veneer. "Just put in my credentials if you have to." I authorized it. "I cannot enter your credentials," I said. "That is against policy." He leaned over the console, his face inches from mine. His breath smelled of stale coffee and fear. "Give me your password," he snarled. The words echoed in the small room. "Give me your password. Now." The room went dead silent. Marcus looked up sharply. Even he knew that line had been crossed. A vice president demanding a subordinate's password in the middle of a meeting was not just a breach of protocol. It was a desperate act of tyranny. I looked at Brent. I did not flinch. I did not argue. You are demanding my password. I asked clearly, ensuring the recording devices in the room and the witnesses heard every syllable. I am telling you to give me access to my damn budget, he yelled. Okay, I said. I turned back to the keyboard, but I did not type my password into the chat box. I did not disable the security flag. I opened the command line interface. I typed 8 words: initiate protocol 0, revoke all active sessions. I hit enter. On the big screen, the dashboard vanished. It was replaced by a stark black window with scrolling white text. Processing. User account Piper. Foster action. Emergency credential rotation status. All sessions revoked. Brent stared at the screen. What are you doing? I told you to unlock it. I am following the policy, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. Section 4, Paragraph 3. When a user is coerced into sharing credentials, the account is considered compromised. I am required to immediately reset the account and revoke all active sessions to prevent unauthorized access. You, Brent stammered, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. Then, the twist happened. The screen did not just say sessions revoked. It flashed a bright yellow warning box. Alert active session detected from unauthorized device. Device ID MacBook Pro X19. IP address 192.168.4.555. Session terminated. The silence in the room was shattered by the hum of the projector. The warning remained on the screen. 10 feet tall. Active session detected. That meant someone was logged in as me, or as the super admin, right now. And since I was standing here, and my laptop was with HR, it could not be me. Marcus stood up. He looked at the screen. He looked at the device ID. MacBook Pro, Marcus read aloud. He turned his gaze slowly to Brent. Brent, do you not use a MacBook Pro for your remote work? Brent's face went white. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He had been caught in real time. He or his accomplice was trying to push the wire through from his personal laptop at the exact moment he was screaming at me to do it here. He was trying to double-tap the approval. The door to the conference room burst open. It was not a coffee delivery. It was Victor Haynes from Compliance and Mallory Keene from HR. Behind them stood 2 members of the physical security team. "Stop everything," Victor announced, his voice booming. "Do not touch that console." Marcus looked at Victor. "What is the meaning of this?" "We have been monitoring the network traffic on a legal hold," Victor said, walking into the room and pointing at the screen. "We just detected a fraudulent authentication attempt on the Blue Hearth transaction using the OPSA's superadmin credentials. The signal originated from a device registered to Brent Kavanaugh." Brent slumped into his chair. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that the walls had finally closed in. I was just testing the system," Brent whispered. It was a pathetic lie, and everyone in the room knew it. Mallory Keene stepped forward. She looked at me, then at Brent, then at Marcus. "We need to secure all devices immediately," Mallory said. "This is now a formal investigation into wire fraud and embezzlement." She turned to me. Her face was grim. "Piper," she said, "because you are the custodian of the admin account that was used in this breach, and because you just executed a system-wide reset during a critical financial window, I have to ask you to step away from the console." "I understand," I said. "We are extending your administrative leave," Mallory continued, her voice formal. "You are to be escorted from the building immediately. You are not to access any company systems until this investigation is concluded." Brent looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He thought I was going down with him. He thought that because my account was the vehicle, I would be the driver in the eyes of the law. Marcus looked at me. "You just cost us the quarter, Piper. I saved you $1,200,000, sir." I said. I stepped away from the console. The security guard moved to my side. To the untrained eye, it looked like I had lost. I was being kicked out. My boss was still sitting at the table. The CFO was furious. But as I walked out of the room, flanked by security. I did not look back. I did not need to see Brent's face to know he was finished. The log on the screen, the one confirming the MacBook Pro. The one confirming the unauthorized session, was the nail in his coffin. I had played the pawn. I had let him think he could command me. But in the end, I had moved the only piece that mattered. I walked to the elevator. The doors closed. Shutting out the chaos I had just unleashed. I was unemployed, under investigation, and technically a suspect. But I smiled. The logs were permanent, and they never lied. The waiting room outside the executive suite was silent. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a sentencing. I had been sitting there for 20 minutes, my hands folded in my lap, watching the second hand on the wall clock tick away the moments of my career. I had no laptop. I had no badge. I was, for all intents and purposes, a civilian waiting to be told if I was a criminal or a casualty. When the heavy oak door finally opened, it was not Mallory Keene who beckoned me in. It was Marcus Sterling, the chief financial officer. He did not smile. He simply held the door open and nodded for me to enter. Inside, the long conference table was covered in paper. Victor Haynes sat at the far end, surrounded by stacks of server logs. Mallory Keene was to his right. Beside her sat a woman I did not recognize, dressed in a sharp gray suit that screamed corporate legal counsel. The chair where Brent Kavanaugh had sat just 48 hours ago was empty. "Please, sit down, Piper," Marcus said. His voice was less abrasive than it had been during the emergency meeting. It sounded tired. I sat. I looked at Victor. He looked like a man who had not slept, but who was fueled by the grim satisfaction of having solved a puzzle. "We have concluded our forensic audit of the incident regarding the Blue Hearth consulting contract and the associated unauthorized access attempts," Victor began. He did not waste time with pleasantries. He slid a thick document across the polished table toward me. "This is the final report," Victor said. "I want to walk you through what we found." He opened his own copy of the file. "We successfully mapped the device fingerprints from the unauthorized superadmin logins," Victor explained. "As you suspected, the device was a MacBook Pro with a specific hardware address. When we cross-referenced this with the DHCP logs from the executive Wi-Fi network, we found a match." I held my breath. I knew the answer, but hearing it aloud felt like the final turn of a key in a lock. "The device belongs to Brent Kavanaugh," Victor stated flatly, "but here's the detail that seals it. We pulled the procurement logs for the vice president's budget. 3 months ago, Brent authorized the purchase of a high-performance MacBook Pro using the operations discretionary fund. He listed it as testing equipment for the mobile team. He never issued it to the team. He kept it." Victor turned the page. "We found a direct correlation between his pressure on you and his activity on that laptop." Victor continued. "At the exact moments he was emailing you or messaging you to demand approvals, he was simultaneously logged in on the MacBook, attempting to override the security flags himself. He was trying to use your account to mask his own actions. When you refused to give him your password, he tried to use the break glass account. When you locked that down, he tried to brute force your identity." Marcus Sterling leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "It wasn't just the access, Piper," Marcus said. "We dug into the Blue Hearth consulting entity. You were right. It is a shell company. We recovered deleted emails from Brent's server, where he was coaching the vendor, his cousin, Lucas, on how to bypass our vendor intake forms. He specifically instructed them to avoid the standard background check channels." Marcus tapped the table with his index finger. "He was trying to siphon $1.2 million out of the company before the fiscal year closed," Marcus said. "And because you set up the logging on the break glass account, we have a recording of him approving his own fraudulent contract." The weight on my chest, a weight I had been carrying for weeks, finally began to lift. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. "Where is he?" I asked. Mallory Keene spoke up for the first time. Her voice was soft but firm. "Brent Kavanaugh was terminated for cause this morning," she said. "He was escorted from the building by security an hour ago. We have revoked all his access, wiped his devices, and our legal team is currently preparing to file charges for corporate fraud and embezzlement." She looked at me with a mixture of apology and respect. "He tried to blame you until the very end," Mallory added. "He claimed you were incompetent. He claimed you were obstructing business. But the logs do not have an opinion. Piper, they just have data." The room fell silent again. The ghost of Brent Kavanaugh was gone. The shouting, the intimidation, the threats of the night shift, it was all over. "So," I said, "am I still on administrative leave?" Marcus shook his head. "No, you are not." He pulled a single sheet of paper from a folder and placed it on top of the audit report. "We owe you an apology," Marcus said. "We allowed a culture to develop where speed was valued over security, and where a bully was allowed to manage by fear. You were the only fail-safe we had. You stopped a $1 million theft because you refused to break policy, even when I told you to." He pushed the paper toward me. "We want you to stay," Marcus said, "but not in your current role. We are restructuring the operations division. We need someone who understands that governance isn't a barrier, but a shield." I looked at the paper. It was a job description. Title Security and Operations Governance Lead. I scanned down to the compensation section. Base salary $101,000. It was a $32,000 raise. It was $5,000 more than Harper Sloan, the fresh graduate whose offer letter had started this entire crusade. "This role reports directly to the Chief Information Security Officer, with a dotted line to me," Marcus said. "No more reporting to operations managers who want to cut corners. You will have the authority to veto any process that violates compliance. You will have the power to say no. And this time, everyone will have to listen." I looked at the number, $101,000. It was validation. It was the market rate I had been denied for years. But more than that, it was an acknowledgement that my integrity had a value that could not be negotiated. "I accept," I said. I signed the paper. My hand did not shake. Walking out of the conference room felt different this time. The air in the hallway seemed cleaner. The hum of the office sounded less like noise and more like a machine that was finally running smoothly. As I walked toward the elevators to go down to HR and reclaim my badge, I saw Harper Sloan standing by the coffee machine. She looked nervous. The rumors of the investigation had obviously spread, and the sight of the vice president being marched out by guards had shaken everyone. She saw me and walked over, her eyes wide. "Piper," she whispered. "Is it true about Brent? Did he really try to steal money?" "It is true," I said. I don't understand," Harper said, clutching her coffee cup. "He was the boss. He had all the power. How did he get caught?" I looked at her. She was young, talented, and paid a fortune. But she was still naive. She still thought that titles were the ultimate currency. "Harper," I said, stepping closer to her, "I want you to remember one thing. If you want to survive in this industry, never give your password to anyone, not to your manager, not to the vice president, not even to the CEO." "But what if they demand it?" she asked. "What if they threaten to fire you?" "Let them threaten," I said. "Because the moment you give them your credentials, you give them your identity, you become the scapegoat for their mistakes. Keep your access safe, and keep your logs safer." Harper nodded slowly. She looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't pity anymore. It was something closer to awe. She realized that the quiet woman in the corner cubicle had just taken down the king. "I understand," she said. "Thank you. Piper." I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. I had spent 8 years being the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who fixed the printers and stayed late to patch the servers. I had been underpaid and overlooked. But today, I was none of those things. I wasn't the victim of a corporate tragedy. I was the architect of a corporate correction. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the view of the 14th floor, I thought about the moment Brent had leaned over the table and demanded the one thing he could never have. He thought he was playing a power game. He thought he could shout until the walls came down. But I didn't win because I was loud. I won because I left a trail. And when he demanded my password, I only did one thing. I played by the rules. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your location and share your thoughts on Piper's revenge. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please make sure to subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.